Welcome to the Real Estate Syndication Show. Whether you are a seasoned investor or building a new real estate business, this is the show for you. Whitney Sewell talks to top experts in the business. Our goal is to help you master real estate syndication. And now your host, Whitney Sewell.
This is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. Today our guest is Andrew Cushman. Thanks for being on the show again, Andrew.
Oh, good to be back. Good to talk to you again, Whitney.
Good to talk to you. I've enjoyed just catching up a little bit before we started recording. But it was hard, thinking back to, you were on show, you were actually show WS 100. And that was January the 29th of last year. And it's hard to believe that it's been that long ago, but grateful to have you back. I know you've been very active in this space, and we can learn a lot from you and your experience. So I'm grateful for your time. But a little about Andrew, in case the listener didn't get to listen to show 100, which I would encourage you to go back and hear. But he started off with single-family properties in the depths of the Great Recession. He completed 27 single-family flips, all of which were very profitable. In 2011, he transitioned to the acquisition and repositioning of multifamily properties, acquiring a mostly vacant 92-unit property on the other side of the country as his first deal. In total, Andrew and his team have acquired and syndicated 1,800 multifamily units to date and has been syndicating full-time for 8 years. Andrew, grateful again for your time. Won't you can give us an update, but I think we're going to kind of dive into it anyway, either way, but we'd love to hear, maybe for the listeners that didn't hear show 100, why don't you give them a little more about who you are and your focus?
Yeah, I used to be a chemical engineer. I knew that wasn't my calling. My wife and I, tried to find some businesses that would be. We eventually found flipping, as you said. We did that full time for a few years. And then in 2011, we saw an opportunity in apartments. We connected with a mentor, bought that 92-unit vacant one, which I would not recommend anyone make that their first deal. If you take away one thing today, take away that. And then we've just been full-time apartment owners and operators and syndicators since then, and it's been a very rewarding business in all regards. So
nice. Yeah, I don't think I remembered you used to be a chemical engineer.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's always a little part of you that stays as an engineer, but right. That's the definitely, and it actually was really helpful getting for the analysis and the mindset and everything.
For sure. And that's a lot to give up. That's not an easy job to acquire, right? Becoming a chemical engineer.
My arms were shaking when I walked into my boss's office to quit. Like, dude, I've got the best job ever, and I'm just going to say I'm out of here as we go into a recession. I quit in 2007, right at the end of the year. So,
wow. Okay. Well, and I believe we talked about maybe that a little bit in the 92 unit in show 100. And I just would encourage people to go back and listen. But I'd love to get into, how this pandemic and everything's affected you and your all's rental business and some things that you all have done. And then just thinking ahead, moving forward, and or ways that you've done, or things you've done to ensure you survive this as well. I just think from your experience and your portfolio as well, we can all learn a lot from you. So I'd love to dive in and just some thoughts about the pandemic, what's happened, and maybe we can start with, collections and how that, how you were planning for, April collections before, it was time to collect and what actually happened.
Yeah. So as we sit here today, at the end of April, most of us operators are all sighing a collective sigh of relief. When this hit back in March, we were not quite sure what it was going to look like, but, in April turned out great. But, some of the things that we did is as soon as this hit, we, our two acquisition people, we switched them from acquisitions to asset management, right? So we went into we were in acquire new property mode, and we said, all right, game has changed. The new number one thing is asset management and asset preservation, right? It's a number one rule, never lose money. Number two rule, see number one. So we were extremely proactive in gathering all of the resources that were out there, like all the new CARES Act stuff, all the new unemployment stuff, the stimulus, all the programs that were being done both locally and on a national level. We went out and found, we got property in the Florida Panhandle, for example. So we went out and made a list of every company that was hiring, right? And so then we condensed all that into very simple, easy to read flyers. We sent those to our property managers and said, hey, please send these repeatedly to all of our residents. And the feedback that we got, number one, a lot of the residents were very appreciative. And then also the response that we got is, there was at the time, in the beginning, there was some of these petitions and things going around of, people saying, oh, don't pay rent. And that was kind of, as an owner operator, we're a little bit scared of, okay, if everyone just doesn't pay rent, we still have the mortgage, right? We still got to pay salaries. So that's not good. And so the feedback we got from our managers is by being proactive and empathetically saying, look, we understand, as a resident, you're in a tough spot. But we also know there's lots of resources for you to help. And so we're going to provide those for you. We're going to work with you and let us know that we'll do everything we can. And it quickly changed the mindset to, why aren't you giving us free rent? Because we had a couple of people come in the office and say that too. Oh, okay. Hey, we appreciate you guys helping with the resources. And so April actually came in higher than March on most of our properties. And so that was, like I said, a huge collective sigh of relief. May, we're expecting things to come down a little bit. And by the time this comes out, it'll be June. Bigger picture, it's tough to say. This is even if we do quickly overcome the virus and everyone kind of goes back to work, most people who are far more experienced and smarter than I seem to be expecting a pretty significant economic downturn that could last for a while. And hopefully that's not the case, but we're going to prepare for the worst and then hope for the best. And so what we're really looking at is, as well, what happens this fall and this winter when a lot of the stimulus maybe wears off, the unemployment boost might be gone, and it's traditionally a slow time of the year anyway. And I've heard forecasts of long-term unemployment being anywhere from 8 to 12 to 15%, right? Well, in the Great Recession, it was 8.6, and we're looking at possibly long-term unemployment higher than that. So what does that translate to apartment operations? That's our long-term concern. And this was a black swan event, and outside of a miracle, it looks like it's going to have some significant damage. I'm not sure what the opposite of a black swan is. Maybe it's like a white penguin or something. I mean, who knows, right? So we're treating it as if it's going to get really bad, and then obviously hoping it's not. And if you want, Whitney, we can go into some of the specifics that we're doing.
Please.
Yeah. So number one, I would say, if you have a lender, be very proactive in communicating with the lender. Very transparent and very proactive. So what does that look like? That says, each month say, oh, hey, just want to let you know, collections are down a little bit, but we're doing okay. And we have this amount in reserves, so no worries, right? And then if things continue along, great, you've had some good conversations with them. But if things do get worse, and let's say you're in the unfortunate position where maybe you can no longer make the payment and you need to request a forbearance, if you've had that ongoing transparent conversation with your lender or loan servicer over, like, say, a 6-month period or whatever, that process is going to be much more favorable to you. And it's going to be much easier in working with them to do that. So that's one thing we're doing is, we're letting every month we just send a quick email to the lender, say, hey, we get good news. We're doing okay. We've got reserves. Just want to let you guys know, no need to worry, right? Just in case we do need their help. The other are
the lenders reaching out to you or the other operators that you know of, asking or in any concern?
It depends on the loan servicer. So we have one with a local bank, and before we even had a chance, they emailed us and said, hey, just let us know how you're doing. We're here to help, etc. Like, wow, you guys are awesome. And that, again, but that's just a small bank where we have a human relationship, right? Our other ones are mostly agency and CMBS. Agency, they haven't really reached out. I think they're just assuming that we'll do it. And then on CMBS, you're on your own, man. I mean, they just good luck getting help from CMBS, basically. So we'll still communicate with them, but the way that's securitized, there's really not a whole lot they can do, anyways. So it's kind of a range, but definitely, if the communication is good no matter what, and the smaller your lender, probably the better off you're going to be. And then what also on the flip side is, you've got investors, you want to do the same thing, right? Mm-hmm. So like for us, we do quarterly reports to our investors, but for this time being, we're doing just monthly quick updates in addition to that. Just say, oh, hey, you know what? June came in okay. We're only down 4%. We're not leasing as much, but the good news is people aren't moving out either, right? So everyone's staying. So our turnover costs are down, and we still have our reserves, and so far so good. And yeah, I would say again, it depends on your relationship with your investors, but for us, we've gone from quarterly to also just a quick monthly update to put people at ease and then to let them know that we're on top of it, right? I think everybody's probably getting 57 COVID-19 emails a day right now. At least we are, right?
At least.
Yeah, like, oh, this is what we're doing. And so you don't want to overdo it, but then just, concise, clear, transparent communication puts everyone at ease and also just helps everybody. So
sometimes I think it's just that you're still communicating is a big deal.
That's an excellent point, because the human mind, in the absence of knowledge or the absence of communication, always fills the gap with the worst case scenario, right? That's what your investors and your lenders will do if you don't communicate with them. So make sure you do, right? So
great point. Yeah. So be proactive in talking with the lender. And I love how you said, okay, every month we're just following up, and with the investors as well, you've increased your communication with them. What would be next, or what else?
So we've done, there's lots of cost-cutting things you can do, so some of them I'll try to hit some of the ones that maybe aren't quite as obvious. So one property we have, it's 150 units. And we actually recently had a change in managers. So one of the things that we did this at a couple of properties, is, when you've got 150 units and you've got all these vendors and suppliers, sometimes you'll buy stuff, oh, this is the wrong thing, you ship it back and they give you a credit to the account, right? So we did an audit of all of our accounts and went through and added up all of the credits and said, okay, we're going to buy stuff with these vendors to use this credit instead of spending money, right? So in some cases, that was $7,000 to $8,000 of stuff that we could get, basically in a sense for free, right? I mean, it's not free in the sense that we paid for it at one point, but we were able to get things that we needed without spending any additional funds. So it was kind of like finding $8,000, right? It wasn't that it was just floating out there and it was lost, but we just proactively said, now is the time to keep cash in the bank and go use these credits.
Allowed you to hold what you have.
Yeah, exactly. And that's another $8,000 we have in the bank, and that's the place you want it these days. I've heard of some people cutting back on staff. For me, I don't think that's probably the best thing to do, because number one, really, especially when you're looking at these assets that are worth $5 or $10 or $20 million, there's the on-site staff, and they're often, in our case, they're maybe making $18 to $23, $24 an hour, right? They are in charge of running this massively valued asset, and those are your core people. And I really think it's a mistake to cut them or to reduce their pay, when in reality they are major partners in this, and our success really lives and dies based on how they are doing. So rather than letting any staff go, we've done some repurposing, right? So we're not doing as many physical tours anymore, right? The maintenance piece personnel, they're only doing emergency work orders. They're not going into occupied units. So they have some more time. So what do? Well, they're picking up some of the additional landscaping stuff that we would normally pay a few $1,000s to our vendor to do. Well, now our guys can do it, right? So what we're doing is we're cutting an expense, and then we're maintaining our core team in place, and so it benefits. And that was one of the first things we did. Is when this all started, we went to our team and said, look, you guys are not at risk as far as as long as you want to stay with us, you have a place here, and we're going to make sure we get through this together. And that's really, I feel like that's helped their outlook and attitude, and they've been super creative. Hey, can we just do this instead of paying someone? I'm like, yeah, please do. Great. So those are some, and then things like we've gone to certain service providers that I would say aren't critical. They're part of normal operations, but you can live without them. We've said, hey, look, is there any way we can get a discount for a while on this, because we may have to cut some costs, and we've gotten some contracts temporarily reduced by as much as 50%.
Wow. Just by asking.
Just by asking, yeah, and we don't and I would definitely actually, don't approach it like, hey, you know what, you better give me 50% to me fire,
Right.
or we're gonna have to cut you. It's like, hey, you know what, this is tough times for everybody. We know you have to earn a living too, but we're thinking things are gonna get tight here. So is there any way we can reduce our contract and make that way we can keep you on and we don't have to let anybody go? And that's kind of how we approach it. And that as, hey, we're partners in this. We'll get back to normal at some point, so let's try to preserve the relationship and even things out. And that's worked. That approach has worked pretty well.
I like how you also brought up communicating with the staff, because I was thinking about even the same dynamic as how we were talking about communicating with investors. When there's no communication, what our mind starts to do. And if your staff is always wondering, well, I'm fixing to get fired tomorrow, or where's their motivation,
Right.
and I couldn't agree more that they're such an important piece of the operations. And I mean, yeah, you want them to know that they're going to have a job. I love how you're looking other places to cut. So anything else that's really helping you to ensure you survive this?
We're doing, everything we can to shore up, cash and reserves. In so all the cost cutting things, and then we're doing a lot with residents to accommodate them, right? So we're doing things like waiving late fees, and we're definitely being far more accommodative than we have been in the past. And part of it's just, hey, if someone, and we don't care what rules the government puts out as far as you can do. We're gonna work. I mean, if someone has been affected by the pandemic, we're going to work with them regardless of whether the government says we have to or not, right? I really don't know anyone who's just going to go out and evict everyone because they lost their job because of a pandemic. So we're being really proactive with residents, really working with them, and sending them resources. And then also we maintain a very tight, close, almost partnership level relationship with our property management company. We do use third-party property management, and we found that's helped to be very proactive in the communication with them, of what they're doing and then what we're doing, and coordinating those efforts, and sharing resources. We've also done things like gone through and we're not 100% there yet, but making sure all of our properties, that our online presence is where it should be, that our virtual tours look good, that because basically if you're going to do any leasing, that's going to be the bulk of it for the foreseeable future, right? And we were kind of, and that's another thing, this is just accelerating those trends. We were already moving towards an online kind of virtual world, and this is just accelerating that. And those who don't get too far left behind, we're probably going to suffer. So that's another thing that we've done, is really, whereas in the strong market that we were in earlier in the year, you could kind of get away with not having the best online presence because you still stayed full. Now that's super critical, and so we're going through and making sure that we're staying on top of that.
How often are you communicating with property management? What are some of the most important, like KPIs that you all are discussing frequently?
We do weekly conference calls with our on-site management, and it's not just the manager, right? So it's myself, and then it's also our acquisitions people, which are now actually largely focused on asset management. It's the property manager, it's the leasing person, it's the maintenance supervisor, and the maintenance tech, and the regional for the management company. So our goal is we want the entire team there, so that everybody, number one, feels understands that they are a valued team member, because they are. Two, we want to make sure everybody is on the same page and getting the same message. And then three is I found it's much easier to get a true, clear picture of what's going on when you have the entire team on the call, because it's a lot harder for someone to polish things up when everybody is in the room, and if you keep asking the right questions, somebody's going to say something that's what you're looking for, right? So I find you get a little bit more candid conversation when everybody's there. If you're having a conference call with one person, they could have someone could have coached them and say, well, make sure you don't talk about this. Well, if you've got everybody on the call, that's probably not going to happen.
And that person may just not be as knowledgeable about something that happened maintenance-wise if the maintenance man's not there, or
Right, and exactly, and so that's another thing is it's very easy for people to kind of get siloed. You go, oh, the maintenance guys are doing this, and the management's doing this, and leasing. And it's been very helpful to have, and again, this is something we've always done, but it's been super critical now, is to just have everybody on the same page. And for the maintenance tech to hear from the owner's lips, your job is safe, or this is what we want to do now, or this, that's been, very helpful, and I would say and critical, and just and for morale, that just constant open communication. And then also, I've mentioned before, prepare for the worst, hope for the best. We do that, but we do it with a very positive tone, right? It's definitely not doom and gloom. It's like, hey, here's the reality of the situation, but you guys you're an expert manager, you're an amazing maintenance technician. Here's how we're going to adapt, and whenever this turns around, we're going to be in great shape because of this, right? And that's kind of our overall approach.
What are your thoughts about issuing distributions right now or not?
So that was one of the things we very early on, we just sent out a notice to all of our investors that we feel it's prudent to stop distributions. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, again, just maintaining as big a cash reserves as possible, right? Mm-hmm. You can always, to make, again, if this ends up being 6 months or 18, the beauty of real estate is as long as you hold long enough, you're going to be fine. But if you get into trouble with your loan or something and you have to sell or lose it at an inopportune time, that's when it goes bad. So number one is make sure you always have the cash flow plus reserves to just hold on to the property. So that's the most prudent thing. And then number two, if a property gets into a position where you're going to request help from the lender, if they see that you've been making distributions, that's probably going to disqualify you for getting help from the lender. So like, for example, if you go to Fannie Mae and you request a forbearance and they see you made a distribution that month, the answer is going to be no. So that's another reason for doing it. It's just a preventative measure for that. And then the third thing is you know what? If things end up coming out better than we expect, we can catch those distributions up. We're not spending the money; we're just holding on to it, right? We're setting it into an account and saying, all right, well, this is basically adding to reserves. So if everything levels out and we're property's still operating well and things look like they're gonna be okay, then we'll just catch up on those distributions. But again, it gets back to, it's one thing to not hit your pro forma for a profit. That is a completely different thing than losing somebody's money. And so that is the deal. That's basically is we want to do absolutely everything to ensure that never happens. So.
No, it's great answer. I appreciate you bringing up the point about how the lenders will view that potentially if you needed help in the future. I haven't heard anyone say that yet. So what will change in the future for you? Say, when you switch back to acquisition mode again, what will change from what you've learned from going through the COVID stuff? How will you underwrite slightly differently? Will you have more reserves? Will you, what will that look like?
Yeah, it's funny. I've always said, I wish I could, the last few years, man, I wish I knew in 2011 what I know now, right?
That's right.
And, that's the problem with experience. You always get it just after you need it, right? And so I'm like, well, that's one positive that we're looking at. It's like, hey, whenever this bottoms or turns around, we're going to have that experience. So there's a handful of things we're doing. One, in the last recession, just like actually, debt was really hard to get, right? It was either you couldn't get it or the terms weren't favorable. And so we used to syndicate, and then buy a property cash, turn it around, get it nice, and then do a refinance and do a cash out refinance. We are looking at bringing back that model. And we're looking at doing that not only on a single asset basis where we say, here's the property, we're going to raise, $3 million or $4 million, whatever. But we're also looking at possibly doing it via a fund. So we have 15 million or whatever the number is already raised. We go buy these things cash, which helps get better deals, right? You can say, look, we'll close in a short period of time, no loan contingency, all those things. So you end up with a better basis. And then again, you refinance out. With a fund, you can average things out. Instead of having one property, you've got maybe 5. And if some of them don't quite hit pro forma, but a few of them are exceed it, it averages out to what you were targeting. So that's another benefit. It gives benefit to that. And it also gives diversity to the investors, right? They're in different properties. Some other things we're doing is we've always gone into our acquisitions heavily capitalized, meaning we've got large operating reserves and we've also got capital reserves, and we are so thankful we did that now, because all of our properties are in pretty good condition. Going forward, we will probably increase those reserves. We've looked at some of the deals we've most recently underwritten. We've increased reserves by anywhere from 50 to 100%. And then we're also underwriting on zero rent growth for 2 to 3 years. Again, who knows what that number will really be, but it's tough to envision a whole lot of rent growth with high unemployment and likely some form of recession. So that's what we're doing. We're also underwriting on much different debt terms. Whereas early in the beginning of 2020, you could assume 75, 80% leverage, pretty low interest rate. Then maybe they're going to fund some renovations. For the time being, that is no longer available. So we're looking at bigger reserves, higher equity, and probably not as much growth. On the flip side, we're also just looking at how do we do a lot more acquisitions once we get there, because it's not going to be fun in the near term getting through this, but every day that you're in a downturn means you're one day closer to the next boom. And the further down we go, the stronger the upcycle is likely to be on the other side, right? So it's going to be short-term pain and lots of opportunity likely on the other side.
Wow. I wanted to ask you go a little more in depth about your you said large operating capital reserves. How were you, do you have a way that you've been calculating that? Is it, based on certain things, or, how do you all figure that?
So for operating reserves, generally what we do is we take 3 months of the mortgage payment, insurance, property taxes, and payroll, and whatever that monthly expense is, multiply it times 3, and that's operating reserve. And then on the capital reserve, we will typically say, okay, what is our renovation budget? Because we're usually doing some form of value add type property, and we will say, okay, here's our renovation budget, it's $1 million, and we want a 10 to 15% contingency. So we're going to we'll maybe put in 10%, right? That's another $100,000. And then what we also do is in most cases, we'll put in a long-term capital reserve. This might not be as important if someone's going to hold for only a couple of years, but we're typically looking at 5 to 10 years. And 7 years down the road, who knows what's going to pop up? So it could be foundation, plumbing. There's so many things. So we also typically have maybe another 10% in just long-term capital reserve. And candidly, that's made getting new deals harder in the previous 2 years, because obviously the more capital you're raising, the drops the return. But it's made it so we can sleep at night now, because we have those reserves. And then going forward, we're instead of going back to the operating, where I said we multiply it by 3, now we're probably going to multiply it by 6, right? And just and build that up. And the lenders are doing the same thing. If you go get a Fannie Mae loan right now, when you close, they are requiring that you take 12 months of payments, principal, interest, and escrows. And up front, you have to put that in the account, and they're going to hold on to it. Right, so that's a whole lot more cash that we have to raise going into a deal if we're getting a Fannie Mae loan. So the lenders are taking the same approach, and I think it's wise as an owner or operator to do the same.
Great information, Andrew. I'm so grateful that you've come back on the show again. Just amazing information, and I love hearing how you're learning things from this and how you're going to change potentially moving forward, and even safeguard even more, and how you all are calculating those things. I think it's so valuable to myself as an operator, but to so many other operators that are listening, and even passive investors that are meeting operators and wondering how they should be operating properties. I think it's great for them to hear different strategies and how we're safeguarding to ensure we survive this and are more prepared for future, crises or pandemics, whatever it may be. What's another way potentially that you all have improved your business that we could apply to ours?
Well, we're kind of being, like I said, we're even being more forced into the digital age. And, we recently, like I said, we had just brought on 2 people to help with acquisitions, and we transitioned them to asset management. And then also, like I said, increased communication, both, to lenders, to investors, to staff. I think that's key for anybody, whether you've got, a duplex or 2,000 units, right? So if you've got a duplex, you want to be communicating with your tenants. Hey, how are you guys doing? How are your jobs doing? Are you able to work from home? Are you guys healthy? All of that kind of stuff. And you same thing with your lender. Say, hey, yeah, so far we're okay. Or what are our, we called our, some of our lenders, said, hey, what are you guys offering for forbearance options, right? Just so we knew, but also just, again, it's a conversation piece. So really just upping that communication and in all aspects of the business.
Nice. So what about the number one thing that's contributed to your success?
Relentless persistence, and a part of that is patience, right? If you go back, I don't remember if we told this story on our first episode or not, but how I got into flipping houses. Whereas again, I was a chemical engineer. I was not a good guy on the phone, right? And so what did I do? We went into a business that required me to cold call people in pre-foreclosure, see if we could help them not get foreclosed on, but if they ran out of options, we could buy the house, right? So, and these are generally not great fun conversations, right? Think about it, if you're in financial distress and some stranger cold calls you and is like, hey, I hear you're in trouble. How can I help, right? So they're usually not, oh, thank you so much for calling. You're the 85th guy to call me. So those are difficult. So I was not good at it. It took me 4,576 phone calls to get that first deal, right? And that was over 6 months, but we got the deal. And I wouldn't be here having done 1,800 units and talking to you if we hadn't had that persistence. And we've done the same thing ever since. And persistence and patience. And lately in the last couple of years, what that looked like is not overpaying for deals, right? Which I'm very glad we don't have any of those right now. And then what that looks like going forward is maintaining, being persistent, maintaining the relationships we've built, and then being patient about doing the right deals, because great deals are coming. They typically don't come too early. They typically come a little bit later. So maintaining patience, so again, perseverance and patience.
Appreciate that. And even knowing the number of calls, that shows your engineering background, right?
That's what I was saying before. There's a little piece of the engineer that never dies inside you. It keeps going.
Wow. And over 4,500. That's
yes.
Impressive. That's persistence right there. So how do you like to give back?
We're all kind of stuck at home now. So at this point, it's largely, financial support of various charities and organizations. And, we see these updates where, they've been losing donors and donations are down. So we're thankful to be in a position to continue to maintain that. That I think that's extra important now because the need has gone up at the same time. And then I do enjoy we're fortunate again at this point. I remember when I was getting started, I was so thankful for the people who were willing to share with me and kind of reach down and give a hand up. And so I enjoy doing the same as well. Yeah.
Nice. Well, Andrew, great show. I'm so grateful to have you back on. And I know this is valuable to the listeners. It sure has been to myself. Grateful for your time. Tell the listeners how they can get in touch with you and learn more about you.
Yeah, I'm on BiggerPockets and LinkedIn. Feel free to connect there. If you really want to have a conversation, just go to our website. You can just Google Vantage Point Acquisitions, and then there's a contact us form there that comes to our email, and we'll respond to that. That's really the best way to get in touch. We're considering actually starting kind of a niche mastermind for people who are active investors. There's lots of great resources out there for people who are looking to get started. And we're kind of thinking of maybe doing something kind of in the middle. So if that's something that's might be of interest, feel free to reach out. Even just to connect, BiggerPockets, LinkedIn, or submit a form, and happy to have a conversation or see if there's any way we can help.
Thank you for listening to the Real Estate Syndication Show, brought to you by LifeBridge Capital. LifeBridge Capital works with investors nationwide to invest in real estate, while also donating 50% of its profits to assist parents who are committing to adoption. LifeBridge Capital, making a difference, one investor and one child at a time. Connect online at www.lifebridgecapital.com for free material and videos to further your success.